All right, we're going to hear now from Kristen Clarke, who is the President and Executive Director, National Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. The Lawyers Committee promotes fair housing and community development, equal employment opportunity, voting rights, and more. Throughout her career, Ms. Clarke focused on strengthening our democracy by combating discrimination, African Americans, and other marginalized communities. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me. Good afternoon. My name is Kristen Clarke, President and Executive Director of the National Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. We were founded in 1963 at the behest of President John F. Kennedy, and we work to defend the civil rights of African Americans and minority communities across our nation. Work to defend the civil rights of all Americans is critical to the health and good standing of our country. The right to vote lies at the heart of our democracy. It is indeed the bedrock from which all other rights flow. And we've heard a great deal today about the grave threats that we now face today in the wake of the U.S. Supreme Court's 2013 ruling in the Shelby County versus Holder case, which gut the heart of the Voting Rights Act. I want to thank Reverend Barber for eloquently describing the crisis that we now face. But I would like to ask the committee today to focus serious attention on the unique, significant, and long-standing challenges and barriers faced by a group of nearly 6 million American citizens who are categorically excluded from elections across our country. Today, many states continue to maintain laws that deny or restrict the right to vote to people who have spent time in our nation's jails or prisons. And these 6 million Americans, people who have paid their debt to society and are seeking a second chance, encounter barriers at every turn. They encounter barriers getting access to jobs, getting access to housing, getting access to educational opportunity, but it is indeed the barriers to the ballot box that stand as the barriers that are most pernicious and anti-democratic. This is an issue that impacts all Americans and our voting system generally. However, the racial implications must be underscored. Given the stark racial disparities that play out at every level of our criminal justice system, these so-called felon disenfranchisement laws have a disproportionate impact on African Americans, Latinos, and other minorities. 1 out of every 13 African Americans of voting age in our country is ineligible to vote today due to a felony conviction. The problems are especially pronounced in a number of states. In 3 states, at least 1 out of every 5 African Americans is disenfranchised, including Florida, Kentucky, and Virginia. And the historical context in which these laws emerge cannot be ignored. These laws date back to an era when a number of states began formulating these laws with the express purpose of focusing on particular crimes that African Americans were believed more likely to commit. In 1901, for example, Alabama amended its constitution to expand disenfranchisement to include all crimes involving so-called moral turpitude, a vague and undefined term that was used to apply to misdemeanors and acts not punishable by law solely to strip the right to vote away from African Americans. Our country's status as one of the world's greatest democracies is tenuous when we maintain laws that outright deny the right to vote to citizens. Among 45 industrialized nations across the globe, we are one of only 4 to impose restrictions on the right to vote after release from prison. Restoring the right to vote to former offenders will strengthen our democracy, reversing some of the harmful effects of discriminatory policies that contributed to the mass incarceration crisis. Restoring the right to vote for former offenders can help ensure that all Americans, regardless of race, economic status, or history with our troubled criminal justice system, will have full and equal access to the political process. And this is not just a democracy issue. This is a criminal justice reform issue. Returning citizens benefit from civic participation. Research has found that civic engagement activities such as voting reduce feelings of isolation among offenders and thereby reduce the likelihood of reoffenders recidivating and ending up back in jails and prisons. Thus, these laws stand in direct conflict with public safety and in stark contrast to many of the bipartisan efforts that we are seeing around the country to promote criminal justice reform. We've seen scattered signs of progress. In Virginia, the governor has taken bold action to restore the right to vote to 200,000 people. In Maryland, the state legislature overcome a gubernatorial veto, and a law went into effect this year that gives 40,000 people the right to vote for the first time. But to Mr. Booth's question, we need the parties to provide leadership on this issue and guidance for the states to address the patchwork approach to these issues around the country. I leave you with a quote shared by one of our allies on the ground in Kentucky, Teddy, a 74-year-old gentleman who states that when you don't have your rights, it's as if you are still serving time. When you commit a felony or go to prison or jail, you're given a date when you're supposed to be released from custody. And when you've completed that sentence and paid all of the debt that you've been asked to pay, and you still can't vote, it's as if you are still imprisoned. Elected officials should not be afraid to compete for the votes of the formerly incarcerated. We need a bold effort and leaders with the political will to expand access and leaders who are courageous enough to restore voting rights to the 6 million returning citizens who paid their debt to society and are seeking to participate in our nation's political process. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to this important issue today.
Thank you very much. Parker.
I want to thank you for your testimony and really add to that in 1924, Congress granted citizenship for Native Americans born in the U.S. Yet, even after the Indian Citizenship Act, some Native Americans weren't allowed to vote because the right to vote was governed by state law. And then until 1957, some states barred Native Americans from voting. And in my time, when I was younger, I remember my relatives, some of them were incarcerated for practicing our ceremonies. So before the Indian Religious Freedom Act in 1978, many of our members were arrested and incarcerated. And so a lot of our members, tribal members, do not have the right to vote because of the crimes that they committed. For some of them were just practicing our ceremonies, going to our potlatches, using our medicine, singing our songs and so forth. So it's something that I grew up understanding, and we were taken out of that. So it's very much, we really need national legislation to help protect and to further our voting rights, because without that, we don't have a voice. And I do agree with you as far as those who have done their time, they can come out and be part of the process. And in fact, our members of the society need to be a part of the process and need to have the right to vote. And so I just want to thank you for your testimony.
Thank you. And the racial disparities are severe, but this is not a black-white issue. At the end of the day, this is an issue about our voting process, about American democracy. So I couldn't agree with you more.
Mr. Gibbon.
Thank you so much for this. And just one argument that I've found useful as we take on the complete outrageousness of...
Keep your voice up.
One of the arguments that I've found useful as we take on the outrageousness of this disenfranchisement is to point out that it's not something that is just obvious or, there are states in the Union, a couple anyway, including my own, where people are allowed to vote while they're in prison. And so it should not be seen, it should be seen as the most obvious. We should just talk about it always with just complete astonishment that somehow this punishment lingers on. It's questionable to me whether it's I think people should be allowed to vote while they're in prison too, but I guess all I'm saying is thank you, because the right key to be talking about this in all the time is one of outrage. This is just as direct a challenge to the idea of what it means to be a part of a constitutional system that one could imagine.
You must be from Maine or Vermont,
From
one of
Vermont,
the two states in the country that does not restrict or limit the right to vote, even when you're in prison. I think that Maine and Vermont stand as leaders in this regard, and we need leadership at the national level to help push the other 40 states to catch up to where Maine and Vermont stand on this issue.
Thank you very much. And I want to, overall, we see it in Maryland and we see it throughout the country. So many young lawyers coming along. I remember in Maryland, when I got admitted to the bar in 1976, I could literally count on 4 hands the number of African American lawyers in the whole state. And now I don't know 20th of them. There's so many. But we see more and more young lawyers coming forward and addressing issues like this. And it just shows you how important it is to have our entire society a part of first of all, being well educated, to be in a position to make a difference. And I want you and others to go back to your organizations and tell them that there are a lot of people that really appreciate what you all are doing. It really does mean a lot, because I live in a neighborhood where a lot of young men, I venture to guess, I've been here in this house for 35 years, I'd venture to guess at least 60% of the young people within a 1-mile block of where I live have criminal records, have been in the past denied the right to vote, and again, but you are speaking for them, and I really do thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Cummins, and thank you for your leadership. If we're going to end the era of mass incarceration, we need to ensure that when people come out of our jails and prisons that they're given access to opportunity. And so many of them recidivate because they can't get access to jobs, access to housing, access to schools, but we've got to care deeply about the fact that so many of them are excluded from the ballot box and denied the ability to really have the rights of citizenship restored upon them. So thank you for your leadership, and thanks to the committee for bringing attention to this incredibly important issue today.
Thank you very much.